When you think of Victorian music, what do you imagine? If you're like me and most people, you probably think of Beethoven, Bach, orchestral themes, and powerful melodies. You probably think of things like the Nutcracker or Swan Lake. However, if this is what you think of when you hear the term Victorian music, you'd be entirely wrong. Well, technically not entirely wrong, but mostly wrong. The part about orchestral themes and powerful melodies is correct, but things like the Nutcracker and Swan Lake actually had nothing to do with the Victorian era. They were created during the Victorian era, but actually had nothing to do with Great Britain at all. In fact, most of the famous melodies, musicians, and composers we think of today, when we think of classical music, didn't come from or go anywhere near Great Britain. Well, how about Frédéric Chopin? That could be British, right? Well, no, he was Polish and lived in France. Okay, how about Franz Liszt? Maybe he lived in Britain. Nope, he was Hungarian. Okay, well, how about Tchaikovsky? Actually, I think that one's obvious. The point is, the most famous classical musicians that lived in the 19th century didn't come from Great Britain. Not very great, huh? Now, to me, this was extremely surprising, and it may be to you. The Victorian era was known for its stunning revolutions in industry, architecture, art, philosophy, society, military, politics, you name it. The Victorian era may be considered a British golden age. The economy was booming, the middle class was thriving, although the working class was still suffering, but we won't worry about them. So how could the British have not produced at least some famous musicians, write some famous pieces, or, I don't know, at least win Eurovision? Well, that was a joke, but the point still stands. How did it not happen? Well, the answer is simply the working class! Essentially, the working class's rise in the 19th century led to an increase in ability to participate in society. The working class was able to spend their money on products, services, and entertainment. This led to a shift in the mode of entertainment, including music, in Great Britain. But wait, didn't you say there were no musical revolutions in Britain? Well, yes, and that's partially true. There wasn't an equivalent to a Chopin, Schubert, or Stravinsky. Sorry, Frederick Hyman Cohen. But there was still music, particularly middle-class musical enjoyment. This came in the form of what are often referred to as music halls, or saloons. Saloons? No, saloons. These were rugged, simple bar-type buildings where middle-class families could go and enjoy robust, often vulgar and lewd performances. While music was a key part of these halls, they were truly a variety performance center. Comedy, plays, and stunts were all part of the agenda in the British Music Hall. These music halls became so popular that by 1875, there were about 375 music halls. Just in the center of London. I mean, no wonder there weren't any famous composers being talked about. Who would want to listen to Swan Lake for the 8th time instead of going and seeing the Lion Comique and making fun of the upper class? One such music hall fanatic was the esteemed Mary Lloyd. Known for her lowly, often risque performances, Mary Lloyd was a singer, comedian, actress, and sketch artist. Her talent came not only in music, but nearly every performance art. She was the true poster of the British Music Hall. Along with Lloyd, there was Stephen Foster. Though an American, his music was vastly influential to middle-class entertainment. Or perhaps Charles Edward Horn, son of a German adventurer, who would compose many pieces to perform in music halls until his death in 1849. Even Irish writer Thomas More got in on the action of composition. So, what kind of music was actually performed in these music halls? We've already established that it wasn't the classical orchestral performances that the British were used to. This would be a bore to the working class audiences who came to have fun. Well, the answer is folk music. Folk music in Great Britain? Preposterous! Well, for the noble class, yes, but for music hall audiences, this was the perfect music to play. Some of it originated in Britain itself, but much of the inspiration for British music hall folk tunes came from America. America was built on the backs of low-class, regular people, looking to diverge from the British culture of properness and royalty. As such, the 19th century in America saw high prominence in the developed folk culture. Musicians like Scott Joplin would shape ragtime music and folk music alike. One musician of importance, though unknown, was the fabulous Florrie Ford. Born in Australia but raised in England, she became especially known for performing See Me Dance the Polka at the Polytechnic Hall. Later, going on to the 20th century, she would release records being noted for her strong, clear voice. She was often referred to as the Australian Marie Lloyd. There was also George LeBorn, dubbed Champagne Charlie, off of the name of his most famous tune.
Champagne Charlie is my name. Champagne drinking is my game. There's no drink as good as fizz, fizz, fizz. I'll drink every drop there is.
But this wasn't his only song. He wrote a few. Yeah. There was also Alfred Vance, who actually had a rivalry with George LeBorn, writing Clicquot in return, and eventually ending the battle with Beautiful Beer. Was this the first ever unspoken musician feud? Maybe. You can probably get a picture of what music halls may have sounded like. The singers, dancers, and performers of the time sought not to appeal to upper-class royalty with satirical burlesque, but rather copy the experiences of daily street life in England. While it may seem like music halls were just a bunch of drunk singing Brits, well, they were, but there was much more to it than just that. So, now that you've seen what music in Victorian Britain wasn't, what it was, what it sounded like, where it came from, and who wrote it, maybe you can build a better image of what entertainment in Britain looked like as a whole, and see why. Britain was shifting cultures, shifting away from an upper-class dominating society to a more balanced one. The middle class was on the rise due to an industrial revolution, and music halls were just one result of this rise. Hopefully now, when you hear the term Victorian music, you'll know what to think of. It's not about classical music. There wasn't much of that around this time. You'll think of people like Champagne Charlie or Marie Lloyd, because it's people like them who shaped our culture today.